You are listening to the MorePrayer podcast, a Prayer PDX initiative. Prayer PDX is a movement based in Portland, Oregon that seeks to resource, equip and engage the church in united, sustained prayer for spiritual awakening. In this first series, we're introducing you to members of the team and providing some tools to aid the pursuit of prayer. You can find out more at prayerpdx.org or by following Prayer PDX on your social media platforms. I have with me today Dr. Mark Jones. So Mark is newly retired from a really long and successful career in private practice dentistry. He is an elder at Mannahouse in Portland here, where he oversees prayer ministry, and I hear lots of stories about how fruitful that has been. He also teaches a course on the ministry of prayer at Portland Bible College, and I'm sure he'll share some stories of that at some point, either in this podcast or if you ever get a chance to sit down and hear from him. He's always got testimonies of what he's seen in the lives of the kids there, which is wonderful. So Mark has an incredible passion to see people experience authentic relationship with God. And one of the tools that he uses is called the 40-Day Worship Challenge. And so I'm going to be asking Mark to explain a bit about what that is and how we can use and engage that in the church. So he has a couple of books that you can get that Mark has written. One of them is his curriculum, Unscripted, which is about the 40-Day Worship Challenge. He also has a book that's called Cultivating Prayer and Intercession in the Local Church, and I'd encourage you to check those out. But before we jump into some questions from Mark, I want to say I've had the privilege of getting to know Mark over the last, I don't know what it is now, 6-9 months that I've been part of the MorePrayer team. And I think the first day, Mark, that I interacted with you in one of those meetings, I was really struck by you being one of those people who ooze Jesus. I had a professor that would describe that experience of meeting these people that just ooze Christ. And that was definitely my experience when I met you. You're one of those people, as I encountered you, I walked away with that sense of, this is one of those people that I need to spend more time with because I want some of what he has. And I'm just really struck by your pursuit of intimacy with Jesus, the depth of your love for him, and the way that spills into deep affection for people. You just have this way of sucking people in as they're in your presence and letting them feel loved and cared for. And then with all of that, just this drive that you have, it's one of those deep inner compelling drives to help lead people into the arms of Jesus. And it's so captivating to be around. And so it's so fun to be linking shields with you, as you like to say, as we do this. So yeah, I'm excited to ask you some questions and hear what's on your heart. So to make it nice and easy and introduce people to you a little bit, the first question I've got for you is, what is it about prayer and about prayer ministry that gets you excited?
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I'm enjoying our relationship, friendship, and just the team, the MorePrayer team, and just growing in prayer together. We're stronger together. I always say 2 people are better than 1. We can help each other succeed, and we're better together. And so very encouraged to be here and share. Prayer is just a passion. I think of it not as something we do, but that it's somebody we're with. And so since it's just getting to know God, I think that it's been exciting for me to just serve in any way I can to help others grow closer to God, just to be closer in his presence, to walk with him, to know him. And so that's been probably the single passion that's been in my heart, to help people really experience the Lord's presence. And you know, it wasn't always that way for me. I just share, if I can, just a quick testimony. I was in dental school years ago, and it was shortly after I came back to the Lord in college, and I went out in the woods and used to worship the Lord, and I felt he wanted me just to worship him for 15 minutes in the woods, and before I went to dental school. And so I'd go out there, and I was going to a small church in Milwaukee, Oregon. And I just go out there in the morning and feel his presence. And sometimes it was overwhelming. Other times it was just the moments, the time out there. And I'd come in, read my Bible, and then I go off to dental school. But I noticed that something remarkable was happening in my heart in relationship to dental school, relationship to school, relationship to sharing my faith, relationship to everything started to change. And so that experience went on for years. It didn't really categorize that experience, really didn't quantitate that, really didn't make the association between time alone with him and what was happening. It was just going through dental school, but it wasn't until years later. So I had that experience, and then it wasn't until years later I was prayer pastor and things were happening, but I went through a really tough spot in my life, and it was very difficult. And at that time, I wasn't meeting with the Lord in the morning, even though I was the prayer pastor of the church. Life, family, busyness, there's a robber, there's a thief, and he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I've come to the realization that he really doesn't want us to know God, the enemy. He doesn't want us to spend time with him. And of course, again, I'm not quantitating that. I'm not thinking about that. And yet I was I was almost to a nervous breakdown, and I was at a point I couldn't cope. And I remember a friend got me cycling, riding a bicycle, just road bike. I liked athletics. I liked physical fitness. I always thought, if you work out, maybe that helps your stress. And I got myself on the bike, and I got down the street, and I was on Marine Drive, and I was riding along, and it was like an epiphany moment. It all happened in about 100 yards that I was riding. And the Lord said, the closest you were to me was dental school. And this is 30 years later, I had a flashback of the woods and the times with him. And then I began to realize, wow, I was with him, and I got me through. And amazingly well, I had amazing peace, and I was sharing my faith. And here I am now. I'm stressed. I'm in a church. I've got leadership. I've nice family, but I'm almost to a breakdown point with the stress, and never equated it to not meeting with him in the morning. Never thought about that. I just thought if I stayed busy, served, loved people, was on the front row of the church, all these things, everything was going to be okay. And somehow the time alone with him got taken. But I wasn't associating that. It just was clouded, crowded. I like to say cluttered, confused, and critical. Just my mind was a mess. And in that bike ride, when the Lord said, the closest we ever were was dental school, and I flashed back to those intimate moments in the woods. Sometimes I'd fall over, and his presence would come on me. I didn't realize then he was empowering me for the day, but I didn't take it for granted, but I made no association between the two until this moment. And I realized that everything I produced in that time in dental school, the people saved, getting through, peace, was all related to that moment. So as he said, the closest we ever were was dental school. That's all he said. And he had plenty of things he could have corrected me on, things I wasn't doing right. But he wanted to remind me of the relationship with him and the power inside that relationship and the closeness we had. So as I was writing it, just a few more feet, it dawned on me, he said, the closest we ever were. And I asked him, did you get anything out of those times that we met? And this is very subjective, but I'll say it. Pleasure went through my body. And then I realized I was in a relationship that I was neglecting. And as I was writing, I realized that he got as much out of those times that I met with him as I did. And it's hard to equate how God gets something out of me, because I feel like I'm going there to get something from him. And I said to him, if it meant that much to you, I won't miss again. And that was 12 years ago. And so I rode down the road, and I was thinking about that, and I thought, okay, tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to meet with the Lord. I'm a mess. My mind's fragmented. I suffer from panic and anxiety. I'm about ready to have a nervous breakdown. I used to sit in a chair in our bedroom. My wife would come by and say, "What are you doing there?" And I'd just say, "I'm thinking." And I wasn't thinking, I was worrying. So I called that chair the chair of depression. So you would think that with this revelation that day, the next day I'd just jump up and zip over and meet with the Lord, but it wasn't quite that simple. When I woke up that next morning, I had determined, not religiously, but relationally, that I was going to meet with the Lord that morning. I promised him I wouldn't miss again, and that I would be there. I would show up. What did I have to lose? I was going crazy anyway. But it was interesting that that morning the depression was 4 times worse. I felt paralyzed. And I said to the Lord, I'm getting up. And I'm going to meet with you. If I've got to crawl there, I'm going to meet with you. So came around the bed, and I went by the chair of depression. And the Lord spoke to me and said, the devil has been using depression to keep you from me.
Wow.
I said, then I'm already past the chair. I've since thrown that chair out of the room, got rid of it, but I didn't get rid of depression. God did. So I made it to a coffee shop, just a Christian coffee shop, and got there when they opened and got a cup of coffee, sat in the corner, and just listened to music, and tears just started to roll down my face. Just felt like a bath, felt like a waterfall, felt like a spring. I don't know. So I thought, wow, that was good. Went off to work and felt better. Next day. Then I found a book, and a devotional book, so I took that with me. And you'd have thought I was overseeing prayer ministries, that I'd have had a fabulous prayer life or fabulous, I felt obligated to pray. And probably if I'd started devotions before that encounter, I probably would have just been doing something. But this was not about doing anything. This was about meeting with somebody with a capital S. Second day went by, third day, fourth day, made it through 40 days. And wow, it's like my mind's clearing up. Like, it didn't happen at day 2, day 3. My circumstances didn't change at all. In fact, I think they were getting worse. But I was getting better. After 80 days, it was like, whoa. After 120 days, it was like, what is happening to me? After 160 days, I was like, I've never felt these things. After a year, my wife said, wow. She said, prior to that, she had made a statement to me that startled me. We had all kinds of good things happening to us, but she said, I think you're the most unhappy person prior to this encounter, this bike ride. I think you're the most unhappy person I've ever met. Yet I was the guy sitting on the front row, worshiping, elder, leader, beautiful kids. I was thinking, how is it when you have all that, you're so unhappy? Because I wasn't finding my happiness in him. I was trying to achieve something with my life. I was trying to prove something, trying to build something, trying to make something happen. But she said it after a year, and she doesn't pass out these kinds of things lightly. She said, you know, you're changing. You're really changing. I said, well, if I'm changing, then our circumstances aren't any different. But the only thing different is I'm meeting with him, and I'm enjoying that every morning. Could we make an agreement that that just never changes for the rest of our life? Because I made a commitment to him that if it meant that much to you, I wouldn't miss again. I'm certainly the beneficiary of time alone with God. So what happened was I just noticed every day I was being equipped for the day. I was being made ready for the day. I started thinking about things like manna for the day and grace for the moment. Things were happening. Then just 6 months, after 6 months, before Susan had mentioned that, the place I went to burned down. It actually, the whole entire the place burned down. Wow. So I realized, wow. And I realized I was only giving myself a half hour, but I thought, oh, well. My wife said, I just learned on the news that the place that you're meeting burned down. You better figure out something for tomorrow. And I felt this kind of desperation, like, my God, Lord, where are we going to meet? Like, where are we going to meet? You know, we get security in places, in environments, but so quickly my wife looked up and said, oh, Starbucks opens at such. So I realized, wow, I'm not going to get the worship music there, so I guess I'll have to bring some headphones. So I started to manage my Bible and some headphones and some journal, and just began to quickly pivot and just continued on. But what was beautiful was, instead of it being a half hour, now it was an hour. Just kind of growing. Just like any relationship, just growing. And so after that year, I realized, wow, if my wife recognizes it, then something must be happening. Then my thought was, wow, I can't transform myself. I can't fix myself. I tried that all those years, and now I'm just sitting with it. And things are changing. So that was the beginning of the journey. So after a period of time, I just wanted to share it. I just didn't feel like I could just keep doing this and not share this, not help others find him in a special way, just in their way. And so that was the writing of the book, was just an attempt to create a start for people, an opportunity, an encouragement, because I realized that the thing that the enemy's trying to take from people is the best thing of our experience in Christianity, and that's the relationship with him.
Yeah.
So I just tried to build something out. I didn't want to build out a program. I didn't want to build out, because it was, I didn't know what to, I didn't know how to do it that wouldn't look like it was a program. That's why we called it unscripted. But, you know, everything's fixed in time and space. So all relationships, even like yours and mine, are growing only because we're spending time together. And as we spend time together, we grow. And I realize the devil doesn't want people to spend time with him. And so that's kind of the start of the journey. So that's that's a long answer to a short question.
No, that's great. That's exactly what I want. And I think what's important about your story, with the MorePrayer team and with the MorePrayer podcast, a large part of what we're doing is we want to equip the church in general. So every average Joe or Jane in the church, we want to equip them with tools that they need. But we do have a particular heart for people in ministry and church leadership as they're trying to cultivate a prayer culture in their church. And I think the honesty of your story, I'm someone that's leading prayer ministry in a church, yet my relationship with God was subpar. And I think there's a lot of people in the church in leadership roles, just the beast of ministry, and the pressures that are put on us and the time constraints. I think it's very easy for us in ministry to forsake our time with God and the pursuit of that personal intimacy. And I think what you're sharing is so powerful, and that we as people in ministry need to hear your journey and remember that our lives will be transformed and our ministry transformed if we can get back to that place of recovering this daily and structured pursuit of Jesus. And so yeah, I think that's very, very helpful. So from there, what I'd love to hear is, okay, you've talked about this transformational experience that led to this book Unscripted, that led to this thing called the 40-day worship challenge. So just more practically, what is that? What is the 40-day worship challenge? What's this first 15 thing that you like to talk about? Share a little bit about those.
It's kind of been a bit of a journey, and what came out of it was this 40-day worship challenge, which was this idea that we are in a relationship with the Lord, and worship is so critical to this relationship, and that we're going to worship something or somebody, and yet we're called to worship God and enjoy Him and to be in His presence and to walk with Him. And so we set out a 40-day worship, a 40-day period, and we called it the 40-day worship challenge. And our first act of worship is to surrender our will to God's will, is to give up control. I like to say, give God full control of our life through surrendering. And so we then came down to the first 15. I was in the dental office once, and the Lord just said, the first 15, give me the first 15 minutes. And I always thought, well, that's a doable amount of time. That's not a big amount of time. And so we're trying to make it as easy as possible to meet with the Lord and to come into a relationship with Him. And I always laughed in the classroom. I said, it's interesting that I can put you on the 40-day worship challenge, and we can define 15 minutes and call it the first 15, and then I can make you meet with God every day. Shouldn't you want to? And yet nobody was. And so I realized, wow, there's just this cosmic battle to pressure us to wake up and put our mind on our worries and our fears or our things we have to do. And it's really what God wants us to do is put our first thought onto Him and to orient ourselves around Him. And yet there was this whole dynamic of surrender that I realized in Romans 12, where it says, I beseech you, brethren, verse 1, to present yourself a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And then in the NLT, and it says, this is an act of worship. So I realized our first step of worship is just to surrender our will over to His will. And as I began to do classes, I said, how many of you are having a hard time surrendering your will to God's will? And everybody raises their hand. And so one girl that really set the tone for this was, she said, we always talk about surrender as our first act of worship, that we're there. That's what the first 15, doesn't mean if you spend 30, 40, 50 minutes with Lord, but we're there to surrender. We're there to yield our life over to His. We're there to be the responder. He's the initiator. We're the responder. We're entering into intimacy through responding, through surrendering our will to His, and begin a flow. And so there's thoughts on all this. And I remember the girl in the class said, it's week 10 and this is week, and we spoke on surrender on week 1. She raised her hand and said, I'm still trying to decide if I surrender my will to God's will, if He can do a better job with it than I can do. And I remember standing up, and it so startled me. I thought she was going to share about these intimate moments with the Lord that she was having. And she's still struggling with the very first question we introduced in the class, and that was to surrender our will over to God's will. So this is what we've done. We've set out a 40-day period, and we've encouraged everybody to meet with the Lord first thing in the morning. So give him the first. And this is what we're encouraging people to do: surrender their will to his will and receive his love. And begin a flow. And so we use the word focus to the acrostic focus: fix our gaze, open our heart, connect our spirit, usher in his presence, and start the flow. And so to allow that dynamic of relationship. And so we really realize that to have intimacy, there always has to be an initiator and there always has to be a responder. And in relationships that we're close with, one person initiates and we respond, and then we initiate, they respond, and then all of a sudden we're getting close because we're interacting on this exchange. But with God, we realize he's always the initiator and we're always the responder. And so this idea of surrender is our first response to his love. And it's amazing what happens. And it's amazing so we call it the 40-day worship challenge, which is really could be called the 40-day surrender challenge just as easily.
But people are not as interested in that.
No. I remember giving the manuscript of the book Unscripted to my sister-in-law, and she said, she read it and she goes, hey, I really, that first chapter is really uncomfortable, that surrender chapter. Could you move that back and work us up to it? I said, it doesn't, in a relationship with God, it doesn't quite work that way. So one day I was laying on Heaven Devotions, and I was just opening my heart to the Lord. And just gave me a picture of this place, and I saw a place, Disneyland, and I saw a gate that you go through, and I was looking at it. He goes, that's Disneyland. They say that's the happiest place on the planet, but it's really not. But they say it is. And then I panned over, and there was this other place, and there was a door, and above the door it said Surrender Land, and the Lord said to me, this is the happiest place on the planet. But you can't get through and in until you surrender. Of course, that brings your mind to things like, if you hold on to your life, you'll lose it, but if you give up your life, you'll gain it. The man who gives away what he has, he gains more, but the guy who held all that he had, he comes to poverty. You realize that in the relationship with God, it's an exchange. You surrender over and then he gives back. And so we don't want to define it as something they do. We want to define it as someone they're with. And so the first 15 isn't like reading your Bible and praying, though we need to we have the word of the Lord, and we have our headphones in worship, and we have our journals, and we want to capture every God thought, and we want to make sure we're hearing from his word. But we want to make sure that it's defined as a relationship where we're surrendering our life every day over to his life, because he said to pick up our cross daily. It's a daily pursuit. People know when they're holding on to their life because they're worrying. Any unsurrendered area will be snared, and if you haven't surrendered it, you're just going to worry about it. And God cares about all the things we worry about because it's the things that mean the most to us, and yet we're so afraid to surrender them over. So I always talk about growing the 5 roots: surrender, trust, humility, faith, and thanksgiving. And so this root of surrender is so we encourage people. So just try it. So just for 40 days, you're just going to try it. So you just go in there, wherever you can find a comfortable place. Take the word of God with you, take the Bible, take some headphones, take some music, take a journal, take a pen. That's your survival kit or your thrive kit or whatever state of mind you're in. One moment it's your survival kit, another moment it's your thrive kit. But but it's not a mechanical thing, it's a relational thing. But we have the tools, because if you can't produce music, we have the best music in the world right at our disposal. We can enter into, but the whole key, we just tell them to surrender your will to his will. In that intimate moment of exchange, just fulfill Romans 12:1. And then fulfill the Apostle Paul's prayer that I pray that you might experience the love of Christ, even though it's too great to understand fully. That word know, that gnosko word for intimacy, that Greek word. And then just experience whatever happens in that moment. You know, there's an exchange that happens there. There's a relationship there. There's something that occurs. Now, then I realized that the reason we have the 40-day worship, the reason we build all these encouragement pieces, the reason we take them through classes. So I tell them in class, you'll never have a greater chance of meeting with God 40 straight days than you're going to have in this class, because we're just going to be here to cheer you on. The class isn't the end. The class is only pointing you to something that you can have if you choose. And we're not telling you to surrender, because no one can tell another person to do that. We're encouraging you to surrender, to give him full control. So then we break up the ice. We have, how many controllers do we have in the room? Everybody, you know, and so the class is used as a support group, really, to surrender. I mean, that's it. And so I come along, encourage me, hey, and then they start telling me, oh, then they start telling their experiences of what's happening. And then it's glorious, because no two experiences are the same. No two entry. I mean, the entry point's the same into surrender land, but no two experiences are the same, because he meets with us. So I used to worry about what happens, Lord, if I point people to you and nothing happens. Now that's a lack of faith. So one day I was driving through a Starbucks, and the Lord said, why do you think this certain individual says what he says? And I said, I think he says all those things about you and points them to you and wants them to trust you, because he believes that you're the answer for everything. He said, Mark, do you believe that? I said, well, if you're asking me, I probably don't, but I'd like to. And ever since that encounter, I realized that it's not about me. It's about them and him. And the Lord is faithful, as he was with me. He's faithful to meet with us, and he's everything. And so the whole idea of the 40-day worship challenge, and the first 15, and experiencing God's love, was just ideas to get people in there. Now, brain science, and even Carolyn Leaf says that in her 21-day detox, that the fourth day is the most restricted, difficult day. And I was always, to get through the fourth day, she always said, you got to get through. And I always wondered, what's the fourth day? Until a pastor came to my house, and he was broken. He had the biggest church in his city, and he was talking about some things. And he went on the 40-day worship challenge, but he made a statement. He said, I never met with the Lord more than 4 days in a row. Then I heard a whole study on reading the Bible. And it was 40,000 people did this study, but they were trying to find out the effects of the Bible on a person's life. And what was interesting was, if you read the Bible one day, it didn't have a large impact on your behavior. 2 days didn't have. 3 days showed a little blip if you read it 3 days a week. If you read it on the fourth day, it showed an exponential change that started to happen. Then I started to realize, no wonder we have to create these support groups, because people get started and the devil he presses in them to try to resist them meeting with the source of life. And then they just stop. That same pastor was in my home 50 days later. He's met with the Lord about 1,300 days now. He's going on his 4th year. Transformed.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But he sat after 50 days in tears, and he was saying, wow. Couldn't even describe it. So I think when we're thinking of these 3 things, experiencing God's love, the 40-day worship challenge, and the first 15 a.m., it's all an idea about relationship and surrender and intimacy and dynamic and awakening the inner heart of people through flow, the inorganic flow of God, the power of God, and it hits us organically in ways and begins to repair our brain and physically. And brain science describes, I was reading Carolyn Leaf's stuff years after meeting with the Lord every day, and I just looked at it and go, this is what's been happening to me in my time with him. I didn't know this stuff, but it was because it's a transformative power of God to transform us in his presence. And so anyway, these are just ideas, they're thoughts. We become a little support group for people. They experience God and then they're off on their way and they just enjoy him. And we have people who've met with the Lord for 5 years, haven't missed a day. They couldn't even leave their house. They were so stressed. And now they're running whole ministries, but they're running it out of an intimacy and a closeness. And so anyway, those are thoughts.
No, I love it. So as you think of pastors and leaders in the church that are listening to this and they're thinking, hey, I want to move our church forward in prayer, as they hear you talk about the 40-day worship challenge, and they're going, I don't know. What would you say to them? What's your encouragement to them if they wanted to get started on this journey?
Well, I think the very first thing I think they should do is do one. It's hard to impart something you haven't experienced.
Yeah.
And if they're experiencing it, then they are. If they're not, there may be a dryness there, or there may be something. And so I just encourage, I take lots of guys, I'll take them on one at a time. If I'm talking to someone and they look clouded, crowded, cluttered, confused, and critical, that's my 5 C's. They don't look comfortable, they don't look clear, concise, comfortable, confident, and courageous, and they're not expressing that, then I have this assumption they haven't met with the Lord that day. Because one famous singer, she described Psalms 143:8, which it talks about experiencing his love, and she said that brought her completely out of depression. She did a whole video just on how one verse, Psalms 143:8, brought her out of an absolute captivity. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it wasn't the verse, it was the verse, but the verse pointed her to the love, and when she experienced the actual love, the lover of her soul, it brought about a release in the love center. And then Carolyn Leaf explains all the stuff that happens when love is released. I'm thinking, I want that stuff. So it doesn't matter how you wake up. It matters how you leave for the day. Yeah. And there's just that little window of time between choice. And that's why I call it being relationally determined. Because if you don't recognize that God waits up all night for you to get up and he's waiting there, then you're going to miss the best part of why you were created. He so wants to be with us, talk with us, commune with us, fill us, exchange in us, take out the garbage, put in the grace. Honestly, whatever surgery, whatever is needed, he's got it all. And there's just that little window of choice to get to that place of surrender so that we can experience all of that. But it's so critical that we understand this relational piece. Oh, back to your question. What would I encourage people to do? Just do it. And if they need a little support, I'll be a little support to them. I'll just text in good morning for 40 days. I've done so many good mornings for 40 days, and And then people at the end go, are you going to leave me now? Are we going to, some will say, I'm done. Okay, I'll move on. And others are saying, and some have gone on for years. It's not about that. It's about the relationship. Anything we can do to give support to it. Build in what we call sunrise fellowship, which is just good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm in devotions, good morning, not good morning. Have so many people that come in the morning just saying good morning. All that is just them saying I'm in devotions, and then I text back good morning and I say I'm in. Or if they come, I might be at work, they come in at 9 o'clock, good morning, I text back good morning. It just we're desiring to create this web of support because it's so resisted.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. That is wonderfully helpful. But what I'd love to do just to end the time, would you just take a few minutes and pray for the people who are listening on to what we've discussed today?
Sure. Lord, we just thank you that first we thank you for Jesus, and we thank you for the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ that allows us to come back into a relationship with you, Lord, Father God. We just thank you for intimacy. We thank you that we can know you. We thank you that we can abide. We thank you that we can draw near. Lord, I just pray for every person listening, Lord, if Lord, if they haven't had those times in the morning, if they haven't been able to get there, Lord, that some way, somehow, through just this time together, Lord, there's been a hunger and a thirst stirred. And Father, just pray that you would open up, Lord, that time alone with you in the morning, that precious time, that special time. And Father, it wouldn't be stolen by the enemy. It wouldn't be taken. It wouldn't be robbed, but it would be nurtured and it would grow. So Lord, I just thank you for each person. Bless them, bless them, bless them. Bless them in every way. In Jesus' name, amen.